Welcome to the Prime Health Podcast with your host, Dr. Derek Barron. Dr. Barron, Dr. Derek Barron. Dr. Barron interviews doctors, wellness experts, and healthcare leaders who are revolutionizing how we approach health and longevity. The Prime Health Podcast explores breakthrough science, personal and patient stories, and practical insights that are shaping the future of health and wellness. So sit back, listen in, and prepare to transform how you think about your path towards Prime Health with Dr. Barron and his special guest.
Hello, my name is Dr. Derek Barron, and welcome to another amazing episode of the Prime Health Podcast. We interview doctors, nurses, wellness experts, and healthcare leaders who are revolutionizing how we approach health and longevity. We explore breakthrough science, personal and patient stories, and practical insights that are shaping the future of health and wellness. Now, before we get to today's amazing guest, I want to give a quick note from our sponsor called Growth Solutions. We are your growth partner for busy health and wellness professionals. Now, Growth Solutions works to eliminate your biggest headaches in work, whether it's trying to find new business, new leads, new patients, improving patient communication, staff communication. We also implement processes, systems, and frameworks, and yes, implementing AI into your business because it is critical nowadays. So Growth Solutions is not a vendor. We are your partner in growth. So if you've ever said this to yourself, I'm too busy to grow, too slow to scale, or too overwhelmed to fix it, we can help. Just drop the word below growth and reach out to me on any other social platform, and I can get back in touch with you. But today, I want to introduce you to an amazing guest, and I'm thrilled to introduce you to Angel Turlington, a nurse practitioner with over 20 years of experience and founder of Southeast Aesthetic and Wellness. Angel's journey from labor and delivery nursing to women's wellness advocate began when she realized she'd been caring for everyone else except herself. A turning point at 40 that transformed not just her own life, but her mission to help other women reclaim their vitality. Through her unique blend of advanced skincare, functional medicine, and hormonal healing, Angel is passionate about helping women come home to their bodies and age with power, presence, and purpose. I love that. Her story of choosing herself after years of quiet sacrifice resonates with so many women navigating the balance between caring for others and honoring their own needs. Angel, welcome to the Prime Health Podcast.
Thank you very much, Derek. Thank you for having me. I look forward to this.
Absolutely. So I always ask people as we start out, was there something, an issue, a moment in your life that said, you know what, I want to go into healthcare and medicine?
Believe it or not, there was not a particular moment. I always wanted to be a nurse from the time that I was a young girl. So
Okay.
I followed that dream and went directly into nursing school when I was 18. And at that time, this was when you basically just said, okay, go get in that line, like you're in, like the competition wasn't so great as it is now for even being able to get into nursing school. So I went to nursing school at East Carolina University in North Carolina and went directly from there. I moved to South Florida and finished my degree from a community college, actually. Long story there, but I went directly into labor and delivery and women's health. Worked there as a labor and delivery nurse for many years, and then moved back to North Carolina and worked in labor and delivery, where I met my husband at the time, and he was an OB/GYN, and we obviously blended together, started to have a family, and we had to have a discussion about my career and what my career goals were at some point, because I knew that my purpose was not to stay home with my children. I loved healthcare, and yet I had always a passion. I had been in labor and delivery. I also shared the passion that he did for women in the birthing process. So I wanted to be a midwife, and yet two of us being gone all the time didn't seem to make a lot of sense with 3 children. And we were opening our own practice at that time. And so long story made short, I went back to nursing school to become just a nurse practitioner focused on women's health, and I practiced in the practice and raised my children. And then the aesthetics piece came along in that journey, and that was definitely more coincidental. But that journey is what started 20 years ago. My nursing career started 30 years ago.
Okay. So did you ever become a midwife?
Nope, I did not. We in that discussion, it was like, let's go the route of nurse practitioner so that you can still work amongst that population, but in an office-based setting. So I only provided the prenatal care and GYN care, which turned out to be wonderfully fulfilling. Right. As a nurse practitioner, you tend to see the younger, healthy population. So I was able to, nurture and guide all of those young women. And I always have had this saying, and it's become real also in my focus on menopause now, is that there are so many people that are like little leaves floating down a stream, and they just need that person to just sort of pick them up and pick them out and give them a place to start. And that's what I felt like my career led itself to, even with aesthetics, because so many people are just sort of lost, and they need that direction in healthcare and aging, so it's the whole career that I have gained in the past 20, 30 years has all focused on women and also focused on self-improvement, honestly, and self-empowerment.
Yeah. Love it. From your bio, I can hear that. And from the conversations we've had, it's very interesting. I want to step back a little bit into the history. Tell me kind of the balance or what took place for you to create Southeast Aesthetic and Wellness.
Well, so as I said, I sort of stumbled into the aesthetic piece. It was new to the East Coast, if you will. Botox and those sort of procedures started in California. Allergan is in California, and came east, and of course was in the larger cities. And I live in actually a quite rural town outside of our capital city of Raleigh, and I had a friend approach me, and this is what you hear happen a lot with people like myself, but said, hey, I'd love to have you come to my spa and inject Botox and fillers. And literally at that time we had Botox and one filler, which now we have like 5 neurotoxins that are available, and probably at least 20 different fillers, at least, types and brands and viscosities and so forth. So there came a point in the aesthetic space and in the day spa space where there was some legality rules that became required in the state of North Carolina, and that required a physician to oversee laser hair removal, in particularly because we had an incident, we had a death in the state, and they believe it was due to lidocaine toxicity. But either way, the Board of Medicine in North Carolina said, like, we need some oversight of this. So I ended up engulfing that spa into my actual brick and mortar business, and her as the owner, and she and I worked together for many years, and we began building this business, together, even though it was under my business entity. And then we parted ways, and I just continued to grow what the practice was called Southeast Women's Center. And so I built Southeast Med Spa, which at the time Med Spa was sort of the title. And so we had the space, and I built such a busy practice with the aesthetic piece. And we're talking we're talking 2005. So this is very young, and all of the procedures and the patient's knowledge, and, social media was not even hardly present here, so, which was fabulous. So it just grew, it grew into its own self within that OBGYN practice.
Okay.
And ultimately that practice was absorbed by UNC, which is, a university system here in our state. We have Duke and UNC are major players in healthcare, particularly around Raleigh, because that's where the schools are, and so we merged the practice with UNC to give him a better quality of life and so forth. And so then I moved the business out, because now the business was their baby. And so it grew into a standalone, and we just rebranded in 23 to Southeast Aesthetic and Wellness, because we moved into a larger space. And I have been always 2 or 3 years ahead of probably more like 5 to 7 years ahead of my colleagues and my area, because I'm an innovator by heart, and I'm a knowledge seeker, and I knew that this is where the space was going, but I also knew that it was my lifestyle. So why not bring that passion and my own experience? And I'm aging now with my patients. I'm now a menopausal age patient. So it just seemed very, very from a very heart driven space, that this is where she needed to grow into, to add these additional services for health and wellness.
Yeah. It helps when we go through life's transitions, as long as we transition smoothly through them. So there are times it's a bumpy road in between there, but it sounds like yours was good for the most part. I don't know if you want to share it, but at 40, you said, from the introduction, that there was a life change. And that was maybe part of that, but it seems as though you've morphed your business to doing more personal work with women and their personal health care. Is that correct?
It is. As I said, I had to lean into the aesthetic practice and let go of my medical practice position as the business grew. Yes, I picked 40 because for me, and from what I see with most women, and a lot of my employees are about that age now.
Yeah.
And I'm 54 now. So I'm not ashamed to say that. So, it's like, that's when you just start to know who you are as a woman. The kids are an age where they aren't needing you as much, and you start to have a voice, and you start to realize that, you actually are an entity outside and of mommy.
Yep.
And that's where I really started to lean into my health with working out and taking supplements and doing detoxes. And we didn't know nearly what we know now, but I certainly started to know and pay attention to the fact that we're living in a toxic world. And I don't mean just toxic people, what we know now. I knew that 15 years ago. And so I started to pare those things away from myself. I also started choosing me, and that's part of this journey, just like we said, that I started prioritizing my own health and wellness in that time frame. That's just kind of where I started to become more independent, with myself.
Yeah. Love it. Well, you look fantastic. I wouldn't have put you over 50, so you look fantastic in that. And I'm sure that you deal well with your clients in that regards. They always like to work with one another that are like-minded, and you are a visionary person, which I think is great and helps in that. So you've gone from the aesthetics, the wellness started to blend in, and then you started focusing on women's issues such as hormones and gut health and stress and nutrition. So is that where your personal brand and personal business is starting to morph into?
Well, yeah, because number one, no matter what, we are more bacteria than we are biologically human cell. And so if you're not paying attention to the gut microbiome, and you're not paying attention to how to optimize and feed those guys, and I mean that from, fiber and nutrients and so forth, then it doesn't matter how many hormones you throw at someone or take away from them, or how much you exercise or whatever, you've got to have the gut balanced. I feel like I use the term, and a lot of people get a chuckle out of this, I use the term big wellness because it has become very overwhelming for the consumer. And in my mind, I felt like, because there's a huge study, there's a whole microbiome project that's going on at the NIH and so forth, because it is a whole cosmos that we are learning more about every year, every month. And I just felt like I needed to focus on a specialty that people could could understand and appreciate, and get them, funneled into a place, because I don't want to be another person that overwhelms people by, do this, do that, take this, take that. It's just a lot. It's a lot for people, and then people just freeze. And by the time someone is nearing hormone imbalances start even in your mid 30s. So I don't necessarily only work with menopausal patients. I may work with someone who has terrible PMS, or even the harsher degree to that, which is PMDD, which is like a depressive disorder around their hormones.
Right.
And so I feel like that's the time that you've got to start paying attention to this toxic burden, and start paying attention to this gut. The trust your gut thing means a lot more than what you realize it does.
Exactly. Yeah. So working with women, men are from Mars, women are from Venus is the old phrase that was out there, but all too often, at least from what I've read, from what I've heard, and from, women I respect that I know, all too often women have been told in the medical setting that, you're just getting older and there's nothing you can do about what's happening, when we know it's a hormonal situation. Would you speak to how you can help patients, change that look on it and give them a better outlook on life?
Well, I tell people all the time, yes, I appreciate that question, that, you need to start planning for this early on. You need to start vetting your practitioner, seeing if the two of you align. And if you don't, you need to change. A lot of people, remember, I owned an OB/GYN practice. So a lot of women carry their health care in their OB/GYN practice. And many of them are seeing a provider just like myself, unfortunately. And it's crazy to say that the physicians that are practicing today were in diapers when I started practicing medicine. But it's the truth, and unfortunately in the last, the Women's Health Initiative shut down a lot of science for women, and it also shut down a lot of education for doctors. And that's where this major initiative is coming from providers and advocates for menopausal hormone therapy, and providing the service to women is coming through, because literally the physicians are not being trained on this in their residency programs. And so it's not even their fault. They're being dismissive just as much as they're being dismissive about nutrition, because they also aren't trained on that.
Absolutely.
And then that you have the medical model that is, you get on average 5 to 7 minutes with your provider, and you have wellness visits that are geared towards just screening, and then you have problem visits, and patients don't understand how to navigate that. So what I decided, and it's my model, of course, is a cash-based business with the aesthetic piece. I decided that for those people who are able to use me outside of the medical model, I know for a fact I'm able to give them better health care, because I spend so much more time with them, and that's how they learn. But yes, as I say, like they've got to start preparing for this early, and they've got to start educating themselves, reading books, listening to trusted providers and resources like myself on social media and other platforms, and get ready for making a decision about what they want to do in their lives. And if they are suffering, and this way too much, just like you mentioned, women are dismissed by saying it's anxiety. We are prescription writing. We are a reactive medical community in the United States. We treat symptoms with prescriptions, and we don't look for root cause and trying to undo and support these root cause issues of people's conditions and these feelings that they're having about being unwell. And that's what I'd like to help people undo.
Yeah. You bring up a few great points in there. Number one is lack of education. So you've got to step outside of the normal, because there's other, practitioners that aren't getting the education that you're getting. So you're keeping yourself ahead of the curve. The other is time, that 5 to 7 minute window. where you just don't have that ability. So in your own practice, when you call the shots for the most part and you're not insurance dependent, people literally can sit like they're having coffee with you at a table and talk. And we know that a majority of these signs and symptoms are let out from conversation. And it's just that simple conversation says, okay, she made that point. I'm going to be able to put that back in my memory as I start to ask more questions about it. So there's a shift of mindset because of finances that people have to look at this. But what they don't understand is that shift of mindset, the value that they're getting for that, you can't get in the typical medical model. You just can't anymore.
Unfortunately, you can't, and you never will. Hopefully, we're going to change the narrative on menopause, and that will come back to play. But currently, there are still, as I say, young physicians eager to come out and do the world good and do good for people, don't have the knowledge. And remember, who's educating us when we leave our school programs, as well as who is sort of educating us within these school programs, particularly medicine and medical doctors, is the pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah.
And so when pharmaceutical companies aren't real rah about hormones, then you're not going to learn a whole lot out there, you know? So I think even physicians have to, especially physicians who are taking care of women, really should be stepping up and learning this on their own, so that they provide women this opportunity for the women that want to choose that, because I truly believe it extends your health span.
Yeah.
And that's what, at the end of the day, I'm so passionate about, because we know that in the United States, we keep people alive, but we keep a ton of people alive that are sick.
Yeah. Great.
And on multiple prescriptions. And we are the most, the richest country in the world, and we are the sickest.
Yeah.
And that's just the truth,
Richest and sickest shouldn't go hand in hand, but unfortunately it is.
Yep. So, and not that, again, not that hormones fixes that, but I'm just saying that, there is a narrative shift, and if you've, I think the younger group is starting to, be more, apprehensive or, a little bit, that they don't, medicine, the medical world is not, the end all be all.
Yeah.
They're using TikTok, they're using these platforms to learn and self-advocate. But, I grew up in the generation of, whatever the doctor said, you do. And I mean, doctors are wonderful people. I was married to one for many years, but they don't know it all. They are, very few of them are in a preventative medical model, and that's just the reality of our healthcare system.
Yeah. And the pharmaceutical business, big pharma, does not want them to convert just yet until they can find ways to make money off of it. And that's at the affect of hurting the end user, the patient. And that's unfortunate. That really shouldn't be that way. So I don't want to get into the politics of that, but it's unfortunate. But as you're looking at your female clients from an overall perspective, I know you talk about nutrition. I read something where you made a statement, said you can't glow on the outside if you're depleted on the inside. And that's fantastic. Can you explain how you work with women in regards to that?
Well, I'll tell you, like I just had a consult this past week with someone, and it was pretty much, the same conversation I have with many women. They're burning the candle at both ends. They're holding the responsibilities of taking care of their home and their career. And, there's a lot of suboptimal things going on for them. And yet they want to jump to, hormones or NAD or whatever the buzzword of du jour is. And I have to, again, slow that down and remind them that if they don't nurture themselves both spiritually and slow down a little bit to look within, but they also need to have that foundation of nutritional support, because when you are so busy, lots of times, I mean, you're even eating in a hurry, no matter what you're eating, even if you're eating healthy. But there's a lot of people who are nutrient deficient, and yet think about it. You know, if I said to you, you know, I think you're nutrient deficient, you would be like, okay, well, what do I take? I mean, of course, right? And
You take your
there's
Flintstone vitamins. No, you don't.
yeah. Hey, listen, I don't think there's probably Flintstone vitamin. I mean, there's proof they did a study on Centrum. You know, that those people lived healthier lives. Now, could it have been because that was the population that was taking the vitamin? They were doing other things, you know, probably. But there's the thing in when you blend wellness, and then there's the phrase and the term now of biohacking. It's like all about data. You know, that's like, you know, your smart watches, your fitness trackers, your I have a really cool thing at the office that is a device that you stand on that measures your skeletal muscle mass, your visceral fat, how your body is made up with muscle, hydration, bone mass, and fat. It gives you like what's your basic like your run rate, how many calories you need to eat just to stay alive. So I can teach people how to be in a calorie deficit. But then there's labs that you can do that test methylation, which is a complicated process to explain. But if you don't methylate properly, you're not turning nutrients into a usable form. And so it tells me about methylation, and then it tells me the nutrition status, and it literally spits out, you know, a piece of paper that says, you need, Derek, to be taking 300 milligrams of vitamin E. You need to be taking 1,000 milligrams of omega-3s. And so it's like, okay, here you go. All right, so let's support you nutritionally, and let's get that where we need to be, and then we'll start talking about hormones, NAD, and of course, I'm always going to say behind that is going to come, let's test your gut, and let's then support that, because almost everybody, a gut test reads a lot like laboratory test. I mean, it is a laboratory, but like blood chemistries, you know, it can tell me if you've got inflammation. It can tell me if you have, you know, obviously the imbalances of certain nutrients. It can tell me you don't have this certain type of bacteria, enough of this certain type of bacteria, which is probably why you're having trouble losing weight. It, you know, and it most importantly will tell me if you have leaky gut, which definitely affects your overall health and leads to inflammation, which is where the whole concept of inflammaging comes from. And so, like, we've got to heal that also, again, before we get to these fun other things that people see that are the hot topics on TikTok.
Okay, so if we look at gut health and we look at hormone issues and we look at nutrition, and you can improve that, where does detoxification come into play for you and your clients?
Good question. I like that.
Yeah.
So everybody needs to detox. I mean, and we just said that the toxin overload, the analogy is always, you know, think of a bucket, and it just finally fills and it overflows. And that's when people start to have, you know, some of these symptoms that could be everything from a rash to brain fog. Okay. And so I believe that everyone should detox once a year. And with detoxing, I am very strict also that they need to take a daggone month off of drinking alcohol, you know, which we won't go down that rabbit hole, but that's, you know, we're self-medicating, right? You know, particularly women. And we've normalized that in today's society, but that's contributing to cancers and lots of other things. But, you know, it's a commitment to do a detox for a month. But detoxing is like one of those things that lots of times I will have people, depending on their tolerance level, I'll have them do anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, either in their health program or definitely prior to starting hormones, particularly if they are above 60. Because your liver does a lot of work in steroid hormone metabolism, and if it's not working well, and it's sort of bogged down, you're not going to get as good of a result with your hormones. Again, all of which this is things that even in the best of a medical setting, you're not going to get offered because this is not their specialty and they don't have the understanding or maybe don't have the philosophy that this is helpful. But I can tell you that it is because I've seen it.
Yeah. In your current practice, your own that you see the women, what are the most common conditions that you see walking through your doors or through your virtual component today?
Well, we see, again, when you are most of the time when you and remember, I've grown up with my patients, so we've aged together, and I've always tried to be an example of aging very naturally, and I have never overused aesthetic enhancements because I've felt like I needed to represent, a very normal appearance, not too over the top, all those sort of things that you see on TV and so forth, which can be easy and I watched it happen to saw a lot of colleagues that you're like, oh my God, she's got to stop. And I didn't want to be that person, but when you're aging, you see, women see changes. Women's skin is thinner, and then when they lose hormones, the aging process, the external aging process becomes more rapid. And so, I definitely talk a lot about the physical, the physical beauty, the outward beauty that's changing and the age related changes from an aesthetic standpoint. That's an everyday conversation. My under eyes that look terrible now, what am I going to do with this? All those sort of things. Like, we're girls. We don't like that stuff. You guys are lucky. Y'all just get better looking. And we're over here like belting away. But I see a wide range. If I see anyone who has any kind of GI disorder, especially autoimmune, I believe we could fix a lot of that, and by supporting them and healing their gut. If I see anything, remember your gut is your second brain. Mm-hmm. So anybody, your brain isn't suffering from loss of serotonin. And it's the gut bacteria is not making that serotonin for you anymore. Mm-hmm. So, again, I would never take someone who had a serious mental health condition and say, don't take your medications. Yeah. I'm a clinician, but I can improve their outcome with their medications and so forth. So any kind of that mental, piece of even anxiety, nervousness, difficulty sleeping, the difficulty holding concentration and so forth. I think of gut things. And then there's just a lot of people, honestly, Derek, they're not having their menopausal symptoms or their hormone symptoms addressed, and they're being like kind of gaslit on sort of like, yeah, no, we can't test your hormone. Again, here's your prescription. I can't help you, and those things can, be cyclic in nature, or they can be, I feel this decline in my energy or my drive or my focus, those sort of things. I think to a clinician, to a doctor that's got 5 to 7 minutes, that the symptoms can seem vague. But like you said, when we sit down and, just talk straight girl talk for an hour, we get down to, and I sort of make the patient become aware of how much they're carrying. Mm. And also aware of some of the things they're going to have to learn how to say no to, and where we can start to make changes, in their physical health in that journey. Yeah.
You just said an amazing statement that's so tiny, but so important. They have to say no to certain things. And you realize that with yourself of, you weren't taking care of you. Everyone else was first. But it's small little incremental changes that people can make in their diet, in their exercise, in what they consume, the colors of the food that they consume. They've got to be very careful, about preservatives. And I think people are becoming more aware. When you've got someone like yourself that's extremely educated, who's been in it for 20 plus years, you have a way of helping these people so much more. So I'd like to ask a question of you. Could you share a success story with us of one of your clients that you've gone through that have had amazing changes?
Yeah. So, one thing that I would comment about that is, we are always and forever evolving and changing and hopefully becoming a better self. And so I, I, I always lead with the concept that wellness and health optimization is a journey. It's not a destination.
Mhm.
You're like just as much as self-improvement is, right? Like I don't want to say we're never going to be satisfied with ourselves, but there's always more that we can do to self-improve, and so I think in particular, I have had clients that have slipped from that like I say, that desire to continue to push forward and gain that momentum or keep that momentum in their careers, and providing them with more of that permission and that sort of knowledge base of who to say no to,
Mhm.
and then getting them to refocus on themselves and getting them to think about how they're eating and how they're exercising and how they're showing up for themselves, that they now there's so many of these. This is essentially sort of an overview, but this is what I see, that then they gain that sense of accomplishment and that sense of self-worth and self-value, and then now they're back engaged in all of these activities. Now they may not be seeing as many friends as they were seeing
Right.
a year earlier, and they know why.
Mhm.
And they may have paired off some bad habits and had to let go of some things, but they know why.
Yeah.
And they are sleeping better and feeling better, and really, I've said the same thing with aesthetics. I mean, it's a very personal experience, and it's all about what I see them show up every day for themselves, for them to wake up and feel empowered and with self-confidence, to show up for their day in a better space.
Yeah.
So it's, I know that's a very global answer, but everyone is so individual.
Mhm.
It would be hard for me to not celebrate
Every-
all of,
Yeah.
of them,
That's a great point. I appreciate you making me think that way a little bit more as I ask that question in the future, because you can have an amazing result for somebody that went from a 0 to a 10 or a 0 to 100, but the amazing results are those people that go from 0 to 1. That's an amazing step for them, probably because of how they looked at themselves,
Yeah.
physically, mentally, what they thought about themselves. So the small incremental changes are as big as the big changes in many people.
Yeah.
So thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that. From a business standpoint, Angel, what are some of the things that you're focusing on right now to grow your business?
Well, I will have to admit, creating a financial model around my passion.
Mm.
As I said, I'm very much of a visionary and an innovator. I've learned from some deep self work and from working with my own coach to help me learn about myself, that
Okay.
I need people to help me implement my grand ideas.
Sure.
And I'm not motivated personally by money.
Okay.
So, it is more of that emotional piece for me. So it has been a challenge for them to see my vision and then capsule that in a financial model that makes sense. And we're still working on that. And then, honestly, and it's always been this way, and this is going back from we opened the first medical practice. I always say August is 23 years ago. So 23 years I've been an entrepreneur, and it's all about the team you have around you. If you when you don't have the right team, and you don't have people that see your vision and have your back and want to achieve that goal, then I don't care what you're trying, if you're trying to sell muffins or you're trying to, make people healthy and wealthy and well, whatever it is, your team, you're only as good as your weakest link. And it's really the truth. And so I have gone through some turnover in the last few years and have, and yet I have some brilliant women that circle me that are very supportive and been with me for a long time. So, assembling the right team takes time though, because everyone's not the right fit, and especially when it comes to now, learning the wellness, because it is very difficult for your average person to, even promote all of this within the business. It's a lot easier to go, oh yeah, I can get rid of those little lines right there if you want to. Like, it's just easier. But when somebody says, hey, what is Angel going to do for me when she does a gut test, the girls are, it's a little bit more difficult. We created in the last several months, we created an opportunity for people to have 30 minutes with me in a discovery call.
Oh, nice.
That only costs $50. And inevitably, if I have the time, I go over, that's a chance. I feel like that is a very entry level. And I just realized that was important, that they need to have that conversation with me. Like I said, vet your provider, get that feel, is this a person that I jive with? Like, does she speak my language? Is she going to be too much for me? Does she know what the hell she's doing? Like that sort of things. Plus that's when I lay out that roadmap of sort of like, this is how, I've heard your story. This is how I think that it would be best suited to start with you, because, you're 44 years old, you're run down, you've got XYZ complaint. This is what direction I believe that we should go. And then it's completely different for the next one, completely different for the next one. But then that allows them to kind of go, okay, all right, I think I know now what to do. And so that's kind of where we are at. And then I in my practice currently, I have a model for using hormones that is a membership model that people will pay a quarterly fee to be part of my group of women that are taking hormones, that have private visits with me and ongoing monitoring of labs and so forth. And then I have a shorter program that's 90 days that includes the gut test and the products and so forth. So they go, and not that they can overlap. They can do both of them, or they can do one and then the other. But that's sort of that way. It's, again, it's very clear that the patients can say, okay, I feel like that's something that's the direction I want to go, or that's something I can budget for, or so forth.
Yeah. Where do you see if you're building this out now, where do you see your practice in the next 3 to 5 years from a vision standpoint?
I see for sure that there will probably be 2 or 3 other providers in the practice like myself that will be doing this type of care. And once people recognize, I think I am at a bit of a dilemma, because people have only known us mostly as an aesthetic practice. And so, I think slowly but surely they are, hearing and paying attention to these additional benefits of service that we have. And we've started I have a whole kind of entourage, I guess, of different cool, like I mentioned, that fancy scale that I have. And we have an IV room, so we can do fancy IV therapy. And we have the EMF. We have a chair that pulls EMF out, that's also got meditation and goggles and so forth, that you can like really just zen out, and have an infrared pod that you can get in. So, it's just getting people to learn and know that stuff is not all totally woo woo.
Yeah.
And, just get them to try those things. And when they try them, they don't ever look back, so, but it has been a learning curve for, to educate your client population about what you're doing, and being that this is somewhat new and different. And we are in more of a rural area. I've just had to recognize with myself that, the universe has its time and its place, that this stuff will evolve as it needs to be. And I can't push it and I can't force it. All I can do is just keep being me and keep keep trusting my intuition and living, like my passion, because I feel like that I will draw the people that share that same goal towards me, and I will wait for them.
Yeah. It's not worth building a business that you don't want to work in. You have to build a business that you want to, work in, sleep in, live in. That's, we spend a majority of our time in our business. So that's a good thing for you and for your patients. They have to understand that. So I've got a couple more questions for you, but I'll share all of your social contacts here on our site and everything that we can offer, because I want them to get in touch with you. But if someone wanted to learn more about you specifically and your services and programs, where would you direct them?
So I have a very, very active, very fun Instagram page, and my Instagram handle is at your.wellness.angel, which you'll share.
Yes.
And I talk on that every day, almost every day. I think I told you I went and did this really fancy cardiovascular and stroke risk test this morning, and so there'll be lots of talk about that because I got offered to go do this test, and so that's probably the best place to be very interactive with me. I can't manage all the platforms because I do it all myself. So I do have a TikTok, same name, and you have that information. And then I have a personal website that's angelturlington.com. And then, of course, the business website is very comprehensive and has a plethora of information about the programs and the aesthetic and wellness side of things. So there's more information they could ever ask for on the main business website.
Okay. Again, I'll make sure that everybody gets the links for everything that you have. So 2 more questions for you. The first one is for the woman that's watching, I don't care their age, because I think the sooner you can make an impact on their life, the better it will be for them as they age. But if there's one thing you would tell them to change in their healthy lifestyle, what would that be for them to live longer?
Number 1 is to lift heavy shit.
Love it.
There is no question. You can't get around it. And I'm a yogi. I love yoga. I love Pilates. I think we need those restorative things in, the chaotic world that we live in. But muscle mass is probably the number 1 indicator in longevity. So you got to get in there and put some muscle on. Believe it or not, from a nutrient standpoint, I am huge on freaking optimize your vitamin D level because it is so critical. I mean, for everything from mood and cognition to cancer prevention. And I just feel like it's checked by the doctors and mentioned that it's low, and then it just goes by the wayside. And I am telling you, Derek, it is hard to find a good vitamin D level. And because we aren't outside at the right times of day, we use sunscreen probably to a fault.
Yeah.
And lots of times that can improve somebody's mood, just optimizing their vitamin D. And, there's adequate and there's optimal. And so that's where that functional medicine training that I have comes in. I'm going to optimize somebody, so I'm going to want a higher level. So yeah. Getting in and lifting heavy stuff and getting some muscle mass on, starting to say no more to people and optimizing vitamin D. And then when it comes time, consider your options for hormones when you get beyond menopause, because I'd like to be able to say to the audience that the early onset of menopause, which is average age is like 52 to 60, you capitalizing on that time is the safest time to take hormones, and you can get a lifetime of benefit. So the benefits don't go away, and actually the further that you are away from hormones, particularly estrogen is actually anti-inflammatory. And how I said the whole inflammaging stuff, well, including the cardiovascular issues that start to come from inflammation. When you go on estrogen can't undo the damage that's been done. So like for myself, I started hormones 3 months after what I suspected to be my last period. I didn't wait that whole year. And I don't believe you have to. But that's my philosophy. I feel safe and comfortable with taking hormones, and I wanted to take them while I was young.
Yeah.
Because that's what I believe in.
Yeah. Well, you are your own best doctor for the most part, which is a good thing. You're knowledgeable about that. So my last question, you've been an amazing guest here on the Prime Health podcast. I asked this question: what does Prime Health mean to you?
Yeah, you've sprung that one on me last minute. Prime Health. I would say again, I always want to tell people, pick you, self-advocate, because, and I know that can be difficult, and it gets more difficult as you age, and women get dismissed more than men. It sucks. You don't know it. You can't see it. You can probably see it. Go to a car dealership with your wife and tell me how what happens, It can be very much the same way in healthcare. So Prime means to me like I'm number one.
Okay.
And I would say, know that you are number one. And if you aren't taking care of you, then you can't take care of anyone else. And that's where you have to choose yourself.
Yeah. Well, I love that response. You weren't ready, but I truly love it. It comes from the heart and it comes from your life experiences. So thank you very much for sharing that. Angel, you've been an amazing guest. For the people who listen to this, of course, it's a share. You and I would love people to share because it gets more people to learn about us. But the truth is, I say this often, almost all the time, because there's information that you gave that somebody needs to hear. And if it's a friend, a family, or somebody that you just heard with coffee this morning, share this for that person. We'd love to help as many as we can, but if we can help one person, it makes a difference. And there's so many things that you can do to help them. It would be better if they share it for their sake to make that difference. So, of course, selfishly, we'd love for you to, subscribe to everything that we do for ourselves. That'd be fantastic. We'll have all the links in there. But as I say here, until next time, remember that we are on a true wellness journey. We're all on it together. Whether you're taking charge of your own health or guiding others in theirs, every step forward matters. I want you to stay committed to your Prime Health journey. And Angel, again, thank you very much for being an amazing guest on the podcast.
Thank you too. Thanks, Derek. It's been great.